They say that pride goes before a fall, but in the glittering, ruthless city of Lagos, pride does not merely fall, it shatters like cheap glass on polished marble. And on this quiet evening, inside the massive luxury duplex of Lekki, the silence was heavy, thick with the smell of expensive French perfume and burning betrayal. Because Kemi, a woman whose beauty was as cold as ice, stood with her arms folded, looking down with absolute disgust at the older woman kneeling before her. The older woman, whose hands were wrinkled and trembling, was desperately scrubbing the white tile floor with a tattered rag, her breath coming in shallow, painful gasps as she coughed. Kemi only laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed through the empty hallway, before she raised her foot, her red designer high heel pressing hard on the old woman's frail shoulder. She sneered, telling the woman that a village dog belongs on the floor and that she must clean every single drop of water before her fiancé Tobi returned from his journey. But what Kemi did not know, what her greedy, arrogant heart could never even conceive, was that the quiet old woman she was treating like dirt under her feet was not a poor village maid. Indeed, she was Chief Mrs. Folake, the legendary real estate matriarch who owned this entire mansion and the oil company where her Kemi's fiancé worked. Just 3 weeks ago, the world was different. Folake sat in her gold-trimmed office looking at the photographs of the young woman her only son wanted to marry. She had felt a cold chill in her bones, a deep maternal instinct warning her that Kemi loved her son's wealth but despised his soul. And so she had made a dangerous, silent decision. She would strip away her gold, she would wear the tattered clothes of a servant, and she would enter her own house in disguise to test the true weight of her future daughter-in-law. Years ago, Folake did not have gold or massive filling stations or houses in the expensive streets of Lekki. She was just a young, struggling widow, trading colorful Ankara fabrics inside the dusty, crowded markets of Lagos under the hot, unrelenting sun that burned her dark skin as she shouted for customers to notice her. She had walked until her fingers were raw and bleeding from carrying heavy bundles of cloth every day, saving every single crumpled naira note inside her late husband's old, worn Bible to feed her only son, Tobi. Tobi was her breath, her heartbeat, the boy she raised to value a person's character and soul far above the price of their clothes. And as the years passed, the heavens looked down and blessed her honest, grueling and tireless hard work. Her small market stall grew rapidly, eventually transforming into a massive multi-million naira real estate empire. But when Tobi brought Kemi home to introduce her, Folake's heart immediately sank deep into her stomach. She saw the way Kemi's eyes dilated with greed as she stared hungrily at the gold jewelry on Folake's neck, while completely ignoring the old, limping security guard who had kindly held the heavy front door open for her. Folake knew she had to act quickly before her only son made a terrible, life-ruining mistake with his heart. But far away, in a tiny, cramped face-me-I-face-you room in Shuruliri, a different girl was waking up. Bisi, a young orphan girl with a heart of pure gold, was facing her own heavy daily struggle to survive. Her shoulders ached terribly as she walked before the sunrise. She did not have luxury designer bags, expensive lace frontal wigs, or polished acrylic nails, but her hands were always gentle, her laughter was warm, and her inner soul was completely clean. She was the perfect foil, the quiet light that would soon collide with Kemi's cold, dark arrogance. The collision began when Kemi ordered the cheap Surulere seamstress to bring her measuring tape to the Lekki mansion. Bisi arrived with a warm smile, but Kemi treated her like a dog, throwing expensive fabric directly onto the floor. Bisi quietly knelt down to pick it up, speaking no word of anger, her pure heart refusing to return evil. Just 2 days later, Tobi flew to Abuja on an urgent business trip, leaving Kemi completely alone. Before leaving, he kissed Kemi and begged her to take care of his home, unaware of what was coming next. With Tobi gone, Folake saw her perfect window of opportunity to execute her dangerous and silent undercover test. Grave-hushed, she stripped away her luxury lace, her shining diamonds and her golden jelly, leaving them in her private bedroom. She wore a faded, dirty blue Ankara wrapper and tied a torn grey cotton scarf tightly around her silver hair. She rubbed a handful of grey fireplace ash on her face to make her glowing skin look old and dry. With a trembling hand, she picked up a small weathered wooden box containing only a tattered Bible and dry lozenges. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, seeing an impoverished, helpless village widow staring back at her. A heavy evening rain began to fall as Folake walked out of her luxury office on foot. She did not take her air-conditioned Mercedes, instead choosing to walk slowly into the cold, pouring storm without an umbrella. Her bones shivered violently as she dragged her bare feet along the wet, muddy Lekki roads under the dark sky. She coughed heavily, her breath coming in shallow gasps, perfectly preparing her role as a sick, poor village aunt. At exactly 8 o'clock, Folake stood dripping wet and shivering outside her own grand front door. She raised her wrinkled, ash-covered hand and knocked softly 3 times on the cold, massive wooden door of the mansion. Inside, Kemi was sipping red wine, totally unaware that the woman at the door held keys to her entire future. Kemi opened the door, but when she saw the wet, shivering old woman standing on the marble porch, her jaw tightened with pure disgust. Folake bowed her head low, coughing weakly, and introduced herself as a poor, sick aunt sent from the village to assist them. Kemi sneered, screaming that she would not allow a dirty, smelly village dog to ruin her clean, expensive carpets. She snatched the weathered wooden box from Folake's trembling hands, throwing it onto the wet porch before pulling the old woman inside. Folake shivered in the cold, air-conditioned hallway, water dripping from her soaked Ankara wrapper onto the shiny tiles. Instead of showing mercy, Kemi dragged her into the cold, spacious kitchen and pointed directly at the hard floor. She laughed, telling the old woman that a servant must sleep on the bare tiles under the kitchen counter. Folake said nothing. She slowly sat on the cold floor, using her wet grey gele as her only pillow. She closed her eyes in the dark, her aging bones aching terribly from the cold, but her mind was completely awake. The next morning, before the sun rose over Lagos, Kemi walked into the kitchen wearing a silk robe. With a cruel smile, she turned the key in the pantry door, locking all the food away from the old woman. She mockingly told Folake that food is only for those who earn it, and she had done no work. Instead of breakfast, she threw a heavy red bucket and a hard brush at Folake's aching knees. She ordered the old woman to scrub the massive mansion from the top floor down to the kitchen before noon. Folake's stomach rumbled with hunger and her throat was dry, but she quietly picked up the heavy plastic bucket. She filled it with cold water, her wrinkled fingers trembling with weakness as she carried it up the grand staircase. Kemi sat on a plush sofa nearby, sipping hot tea, shouting insults at her as she began her grueling labor. Folake quietly bent down to begin her work, the quiet trap tightening around her son's greedy fiancé with every scrub. The pain in her ancient knees was a searing white-hot iron, piercing deep into her breaking bones as she dragged her breaking body across the cold marble. She thought to herself silently, "My body is screaming for me to stop. My old joints are grinding together like dry stones. My wrinkled fingers are swollen and shaking violently. My chest is tight and my throat feels like dry sandpaper. And every single breath I take inside this cold, locked house feels like breathing broken glass. But I must keep moving. I must endure this agonizing weight for the sake of my only son, Tobi. Because if I break now, if I stand up and reveal my true identity before this test is finished, my son will marry a monster who will destroy his family legacy. She will ruin his destiny, she will abuse his children, and she will drink his hard-earned wealth under the guise of love. So let my hands bleed on this marble. Let my back snap under this heavy bucket. I will hold this wooden brush until my fingers cannot feel the wood anymore. I will crawl on these knees until they are raw and blood stains these white tiles. I remember my late husband's final words in his bedroom, begging me to protect our son from the wolves of this world, and I will protect him even if it costs me my last breath. Because a mother's love does not flee when the furnace is hot. It stands and burns until the gold is completely refined. Kemi walked up the stairs holding a steaming mug of hot water, looking down at Folake, who was coughing weakly near her designer shoes. She sneered, shouting, "You useless, filthy village witch! How dare you cough near my expensive leather shoes? Get your dirty hands away from me!" With a cruel laugh, Kemi poured the boiling water directly onto Folake's raw, bleeding fingers. Folake gasped in agonizing pain, her chest heaving as she held her burning hand. But suddenly, the front door burst open and Bisi rushed inside carrying a tailored bridal lace dress. Seeing the horrific cruelty, Bisi dropped the dress on the floor, ran up the stairs and threw her own body over Folake to shield her. She looked at Kemi with eyes blazing in anger and shouted, "Are you not a human being? How can you treat an older woman like an animal? God will judge your wicked soul, Kemi. Money will not save you on the day of reckoning." Kemi only laughed hysterically, raising her hand to slap Bisi across the face, shouting, "You are both poor, worthless beggars. Get out of my house before I call the security guards to throw you in jail." And with a violent push, Kemi threw them both out of the front door, into the cold, blinding evening storm, locking them out in the mud. Just 30 minutes later, the bright headlights of Tobi's car caught through the dark, rainy night as he returned early from his journey. His heart stopped when he saw the white bridal lace dress muddied and ruined on the driveway. And then his eyes caught two shivering, soaked figures huddled tightly under the security gatehouse in the freezing rain. Tobi ran out of his car into the downpour, gasping in absolute horror as he found Bisi holding his mother. He carried them both inside the warm parlor, his voice trembling with rage as he demanded an explanation, while Kemi walked down the stairs with a fixed smile. She froze, her face turning pale as death. She tried to lie defensively, saying the old village woman was a thief who had fallen in the mud. But before she could finish her lies, the quiet older woman slowly stood up on her own, unassisted. She untied the wet, tattered wrapper to reveal the majestic gold-embroidered silk blouse and heavy, expensive royal coral beads underneath, standing tall in her true power as a wealthy matriarch. Tobi gasped in complete shock, whispering, "Mommy?" while Kemi's knees buckled under her in absolute terror. Her mouth was wide open, her defenses completely shattered, staring at the woman she had abused so brutally. Folake stood with perfect control, calm and absolute silence before she reached into her weathered wooden box and pulled out the dry, laminated legal ownership deeds of the mansion and the oil company where Tobi worked. She looked Kemi directly in the eyes, her voice freezing like winter ice as she spoke with ultimate authority. Kemi, you said a village dog belongs on the floor, but you did not know this house belongs to me. I am Chief Mrs. Folake, she declared, while Kemi fell to her knees, weeping and pleading for mercy. Mommy, please forgive me. Tobi, beg your mother. But Folake looked down with cold disgust, rejecting her cries, and replied, You only loved his wealth, and today you are completely homeless. As Kemi's world collapsed into dust. Kemi was physically thrown out into the dark night, her beautiful pink silk robe dragged ruthlessly through the muddy street gutter. She stood crying under the pouring rain, her phone screen glowing as debt collectors called her over and over again. Realizing that her fake, vanity-driven high life in Lagos had completely collapsed into a nightmare of shame. But inside the warm, peaceful parlor of the mansion, the heavy atmosphere was filled with relief and pure gratitude. Tobi walked gently over and wrapped a thick, dry white towel around Bisi's shivering, wet shoulders. Folake sat beside her, smiling warmly and holding Bisi's raw, blistered hands in her own hands. She expressed her deep maternal gratitude to the humble orphan girl who selflessly shielded her from the boiling water. Bisi only bowed her head humbly, whispering softly that kindness is a seed that must always be planted, and that every mother's life is sacred and must be protected no matter what it costs. In that quiet, loaded moment, Tobi stared deeply into Bisi's gentle, glowing face, feeling a pure soul connection, a connection of true love that his wealthy, blinded eyes had never seen in Kemi's greedy, vain heart. 3 months passed quickly, and the winds of destiny shifted completely for the honest and hard-working young girl. Folake did not forget the quiet orphan girl with the heart of pure gold who saved her in disguise. She purchased a massive, state-of-the-art luxury fashion and fabric boutique in the most expensive street of Lekki. On a beautiful, bright, sunny morning, Folake led a completely shocked and quiet Bisi to the grand storefront. The glass windows gleamed in the sunlight, filled with colorful mannequins wearing beautiful, modern Ankara dresses. With tears of pure joy spilling from her eyes, Bisi gasped as Folake placed gold keys in her hand. She was no longer a struggling orphan, but the proud owner of her own luxury Lekki fashion empire. On a glorious evening, inside that glittering boutique, Tobi knelt down on one knee on the polished marble floor, holding a sparkling diamond ring toward Bisi, who was looking at him with wide, tearful eyes, and with his mother, Folake, standing beside them, smiling with deep, pure maternal joy. Tobi asked her to marry him, to which she tearfully and joyfully whispered yes, hugging him tightly as Folake blessed their union, for her pure, honest heart had not only earned her a grand business, but a genuine, loving family who loved her for exactly who she was inside. And so, the scales of justice in Lagos were balanced, proving that the beauty of a person's soul is far more valuable than all temporary gold in the world. My beautiful family, True love is never about the comfort or the luxury someone can provide, but about seeing their soul and choosing to stay, even when the rooms are dark and empty. What do you think about this story? Was Kemi completely wrong for treating the old woman like a dog? Or did her greedy, arrogant heart get exactly the harsh, painful karma she deserved in the end? If you were Tobi, would you have forgiven your fiancé, or did he make the perfect choice by marrying Bisi? Share your honest thoughts in the comment section below. I would really love to read from you tonight. An even more shocking story about a jealous sister who steals her twin's identity and visa at the airport, only to realize her twin was hiding a dangerous, dark secret, is coming in just a few days. So make sure you subscribe and turn on that notification bell right now so you do not miss it. If this story touched your heart today, please like the video and share it with someone you love. Keep your hearts completely pure. Protect your own soul. Rest well and remain forever blessed.